Hi and welcome to the Nodejs lesson. In this lesson we are going to talk about Node.js and we will integrate everything together, state and props, so you will see everything we talked about in action. So we have to start with Node.js. Node.js is what is called a runtime environment. Let me search it on Google so you can see the logo Node.js. It's what makes your computer run JavaScript in your code editor. So JavaScript is only understood by the browser because it's a language that has been built for the browser, so you can't run it like any other language in your code editor. So it goes like this. Say you make a request to google.com. Google responds back and sends you HTML, CSS and JavaScript that are needed for the website to work, and your browser sees that it has received .js files and says like, hey, I can read this, and reads what inside them and executes it. Okay, only browsers could do that, and here Node.js comes into play. They thought JavaScript can do everything that other languages can. Why not make it so that you can build with JavaScript whatever you want outside of the browser, like any other language, and Node.js was born. You see, Node.js is a environment that gives you the ability to run and compile JavaScript in your computer. You can build front ends, back ends, and anything in between with JavaScript with the help of Node.js. It's like an ocean with projects, let's say. It has some differences than the regular JavaScript. Like in regular JS, you would import other JS files in your current JS file with require function, but in Node.js you do that with import. It's not a big difference, but just to let you know. React also runs in Node.js, although you can write React within the script tags in your HTML file, but and not use Node.js completely. But no one does that. So now let's go ahead and install Node.js, React, and create a small app just to show you how everything we talked about works together. Let's go on Google and type Node.js as I typed already. You can download it via two ways. You can download it as a usual app for your operating system like Windows or Mac OS, and you can install it via the package manager. Yeah. There are different operating systems. You choose yours. For me, I have Mac OS, so I would install it with curl and then brew install node. For Windows, it's almost the same with since or scoop, and it should install it without any problems. Okay. Now next we are going to need create React app. Let's install it and then we'll talk what it does. You would usually use it with npx. So what it does, basically it generates you a default React app, so that you would not create each file on your own, because that's just pain. Let's go in our code editor and use this command to create our app. Clear. And let's go ahead and let's go into desktop, and we can write npx create React app. npx comes with Node.js, so you should install firstly Node.js, and then Node.js has npm, which is another package manager, and it has npx with it. So you can after you install Node.js, you can use the create React app CLI. Create React app, and then we will specify its name. We will say test React. It will probably take a while to install. I think 1 to 2 minutes depending on your internet, so I'm gonna pause until it's done. Alright, it has been installed. Let's now just jump in right into our folder. It's on desktop. Test React, that's all. Okay, open the folder, and here should be our React app generated by Create React App. So let me walk you through each file of what has been generated, so you can understand everything. So the most important file here is a package.json file. Every Node.js app has this file. Basically, whatever you build in a folder that has this file is a Node.js app, whether it's a React app, Express app, or anything in between. It has been generated by Create React App, but you can choose to create every file from scratch. You would start with a command line command in terminal called Node.js init, and that will generate you a package.json, and Node.js would understand that this folder is supposed to be a Node.js app. So yeah, it's the starting file for your Node.js app, which is React, which we use React for this app. Now, what it contains? It contains a list of configurations, commands, and list of libraries that your app will use, thus the name package.json. So let's look at each line. The first one is the name of the app that we specified. We can change this name to anything that we want. The second line is the version of the app. It's also we can specify any version that we want. Next, private should be set to true only when you build a library that is going to be published. Then private should be false. And then dependencies. Dependencies are the list of libraries that you will use in your app. Where does your app get all the libraries? That's from npm or yarn. So the libraries are basically out there on the internet, and to install them we use npm or yarn, which are package managers. So if you don't know what a package manager is, it's basically a wizard that basically sits in your CLI, in your terminal, and pulls the packages from the internet and installs it in your app. Just for the lack of a better example. So the libraries are basically out there on the internet, and to install them we use npm or yarn, which are two package managers. npm comes pre-installed with Node.js. npm finds libraries on its archive and installs it in your app. So for example, we want to use library that helps us work with dates. Let me show you an example. So we want to use a library that works with dates. So we will not use the standard new date object that JavaScript gives us, but we're going to use a library that makes it easier and more convenient for us. So for example, we want to install the library date.js. So what we look for is the npm website. npm has all these libraries within its archive, and we can install them from it. So it says we can install it with npm i date.js or npm install. It's the same thing. So let's copy. Let's go in our app, open the terminal here. So we supposedly want to install this date.js library that we're gonna use. We would write npm i date.js or npm install date.js. They both work fine. If you installed for the first time Node.js in your computer, you might not have yarn installed. So you can go ahead on Google and search how you install yarn. It's a bit faster than npm, but they both work just fine. Just for the sake of example, we're going to use npm i date.js. So what it does is it goes on the internet, and it fetches this library, and it installs it in our app. And voila, Nodejs has appeared in our dependency tree. Now we can use this library in our React app, and the code of this library sits or stays in your Node modules folder. This folder contains literally all the code of your libraries, and this folder can have more than 1 GB of libraries, so that's why we don't move our app along with this folder. When we upload our app on GitHub, it doesn't upload a Node module because we specified it not to do so in gitignore, this file right here. These are the files or folders that Git will not upload. So if you don't know what Git is, we are going to talk about it later. So as I said, the code doesn't come along with this folder, and if, for example, you download a React app somewhere and want to add code to it, it would firstly need to add this folder with all the modules. And you do that with npm install or simply yarn. Let me simulate it for you. We're going to use yarn for this example. So what we're going to do, we are going to delete this folder, like you would have when you download an app from the internet and want to add code to it. So it will not have Nodejs modules folder, and you would go npm install, enter, or simply yarn, enter. If you have yarn installed on your computer, of course. And it's gonna take a while until it downloads all the libraries, because there's a lot of libraries. So I'm gonna pause until it's done. Good, now it's done. If your Nodejs module folder didn't appear here, just go ahead and press Command Shift P and say reload, enter. Just pick the first one. Sometimes your VS Code will not show when it appears. I think it's just a bug. Good. Next we have got here scripts. These scripts are commands that you will use to start your app, build or test it. What is written here is going to be executed in terminal. So for example, if we want to start our app, we would write npm yarn start or npm run start, and it will go in your package JSON. It will see that start means that it should do React script start, and this command will be run in terminal to start your app. And what you see below are just configurations for some libraries that helps us in the development mode, but that's not important right now. We will go back here and when we'll start our personal website, and we will need some packages then. So okay, that's it for the package JSON. And by the way, package JSON, package lock.json is automatically generated for any operations where npm modifies either node modules tree or package JSON, and it describes the exact tree that was generated, such that subsequent installs are able to generate identical trees, regardless of intermediate dependencies updates. And this file is intended to be committed into the source repository and serves various purposes. And the yarn block is just the same thing, but it's for yarn. README file is contains just instructions. You can write whatever you want here. Now let's go to the public folder. Remember, I told you that React has only one HTML file and that JavaScript plays around with its content. Well, this is that HTML index.html. When everything is built, this is the file that browser opens. It has only one div with the ID of root, and that's how it will remain. JavaScript selects this div and places the content within it, and that's basically your website. The rest of the files here are not just important in public. There's just a logo that appears and disappears when you open the app, and you will usually add in this folder things that are public and accessible from anywhere. We will delete these files and later. Now the CSS folder is where the magic happens. This is where we write what our app will do. So let's look at them one by one. The most important file here is index.js. Because it's called index, it's picked by the browser as the default, so that that's why it works. Sorry, if you change its name, the app will break. Remember when I showed you the scheme of React? I'm gonna put a picture right here. There is the index.js file that is the entry point of our app. It connects everything we have built with JavaScript and pushes it all in the div element with the ID of root in the index.html from public. So these are Nodejs imports. This is how we will import files and libraries. Here we need to import React library and React DOM. And it has this function called the render function, which does the rendering for us. This function is new. I think the guys from React added it recently, because until now there was a service worker function instead of this. I read about it on the internet, and from what I remember, it helps Google with some metrics, and I'm not quite sure, but we will not touch it. We will just let it be. Now React strict mode, one argument of the render function, is a tool for highlighting potential problems in a application. It's like a component, but it doesn't show anything to the screen. We will not use it. In fact, we can delete it and just let the app component within. We can just be attentive to not delete the comma here. So again, what this function does, it basically takes this React component, which is a HTML code. We will look into it later. And what it does, it basically pushes it into the document get-element by the of root, which stays in public index.html, this div. All right, so it basically pushes it HTML code. Okay, let's go back index.js, and now the index CSS is the CSS from right here. It's just global CSS that it will be applied to the root element in index.html. Now the app component is what we talked to be a component, a React component. It's the first and only component that there is in this application. As we talked, components are functions that return HTML, right? Like so, and that's the only component we have. So it's index.js takes that HTML code and pushes it to root ID. Now let's start our app so you can see this in action. I'm gonna clear the terminal. So let's go ahead and at npm run start, and it should start your application on port 3000. Now you can see that the content here is the content that you see in the browser. You can see the text is the same. Now I'm going to write here hello in this div and delete the CSS file because we don't need them, and also the logo as well. This is just a default that React gives us, but we will not use this file ever. Like, we're gonna delete everything there is. So write hello. Class name app also does not exist anymore. And let's delete app CSS, which is the CSS that is being applied to the app.js. But since we don't use CSS here, we also don't need the CSS anymore in the logo as well. Okay, now the file with test are files that just test functions and components, but we will not dive into testing in this course. So once you understand React, okay, you can add testing then, you know, like the cherry on the top of the cake. We're going to delete these files now. We do not need them. We're going to leave report web vitals here for now. After that, we are going to put it in another folder, but for now it's okay like this. Okay, so what's left here? We can delete this. You can say div anything and delete the app.js altogether. So that's the technical component that's being pushed to the div root. Okay, now let's create some components and use state and props, which we talked about in the previous lessons. So I'm going to make a folder called components, just to keep it clean, and I'm going to make here a folder called counter page, and a component called counterpage.jsx. This is a component. Okay. All right, I'm going to create a function and export it. So you start with export const. I'm gonna call it counter page. Okay. And by the way, this is a inline function, but you can make it as a regular function if you want. I prefer this way. And we're going to return a simple div for now, div with something here. Now let's create a CSS file for this component in the same folder, and we're gonna call it as well counter page, but it's gonna be CSS. And I'm going to make a class called counter container. Let's be container. Okay. Now let's give it a height of 300 pixels and the width of 500 pixels. Okay, and we're gonna give it a border, and that's it. 1 pixel solid black. What does it say? I haven't saved. Okay. This is the CSS. This is the component. We need to import the CSS here. Don't forget that. Import. This is the path, by the way. Like the same folder / counter page dot CSS. Great. So basically this component now can have access to this CSS. So what we have left to do is say class name, no counter page, counter container. Okay, why class name and not class? Because class is a keyword that has been taken by React, because you can create a class like this, class, so the keyword is occupied. Now, since this is the component we want to show to the screen, we need to put it in the, or to export it into the index.js right here. Oh, let me save this. So instead of this div that we push into the div, we're going to say counter page is a component. This is a self-closing tag, so instead of doing like this counter page, which is basically the same thing, we can do this, because this component does not receive any children, so you don't write anything in it. So we also need to import it. So import counter page from dash components counter page. So folder component, the JSX file. Now it's being imported and we can use it. Okay, let's save this. Good. Let's go into the browser and see. Alright, voila. Alright, so that's what we have written in the file, and check this out. Inspect element, root that root div that I've told you. Within it, voila, there's that div from the counter page component with exactly what we have wrote. So go back. Well, for example, let's say query save. It should reload, and you see now it says squared, exactly what we have coded. Okay, good. Alright, so let's go over it one more time so that I know you got it. So that's the main file of our React app. This is a function from React DOM that we imported. We have installed React DOM in our Node.js app, let's say. This function takes a component that shows to the screen and puts it in the root div in this, where is it? And this index.html in this div, and that's it. Alright, so now we're gonna do another component. We're gonna call it counter. Okay, and we will do the same thing. We're gonna create a component called counter.jsx, export const, the name of the component counter, inline function, return div with hey, this is counter, for example. Okay, and let's create a CSS for it, counter.css. We're gonna create a class called counter with the width of 100% and the height of 100%. And let's give it a text align of center. Right? Now let's import this CSS into our component. So import from this folder counter.css. Now we have access to those classes. So class name, we give a class into this div, and we call that counter. Right, so this. Okay. And also let's import this. So let's import this counter component in the counter page, which the counter page is going to be the parent and this is going to be the children. So the child. Enter counter. Good. Okay. Let's import it. Import like any other component. Import counter from the two dots are to go back. I think you know that. So go back one folder, counter, then counter. Great. And save, and it should work. Now let's look into our website. So this is the counter, and let's look at here. So the parent component, which is, you remember, the class counter container, and the child component with the class of container, and the text that we have wrote here, hey, this is count. So again, this is the parent, which is being pushed into the index here, and it has a child, which is this component, counter called. Alright, we are going to close these CSS, we don't need them, so they don't bother us. Okay. So what we're going to do is make a counter. I think you already guessed it. So let's make a div, which here's going to be our counter, our value basically. Let's write the value for now, and also a div for the buttons that are going to increase and decrease this value. So let's say button increase and button decrease. If you don't know what I did, I pressed Alt and Shift with the down arrow, so it makes a copy. It's a bit easier. You can write it manually, but it's a cute little trick to write faster. Now we want to add a state value. So what we do first is import useState from React. I encourage you to put the most important imports the first, and then what is less important below. So we're gonna import useState from React, and we're going to create a const counter, let's say, and set counter useState of 0 for now. Alright, so again, the useState function returns us a variable in which we keep the value that we want, which is counter. We called it counter, and a function that when you call it, it changes the counter variable. You cannot do like say counter 5, counter is equal 5. That's not going to work. So what you will do, you will say set counter of 5, and it will change the counter to 5. Alright. Now in our HTML we have to show this counter variable, and we write it in curly brackets, like so. Counter. Let's save this, and let's make an onClick function on the button to increase or decrease this value. So onClick. So we're gonna say increase counter, and here onClick decrease counter. Okay, let's make now the functions here. So here we can write functionality. So you will go like const increase counter inline function, and here we can write anything you want. So what we would do, we want to increase the counter, so we're gonna say set counter of counter plus 1. And let's copy this and make the decrease function as well. Decrease decrease counter, -1. So we do not want to add parentheses like this because that would mean that when the component is rendered to the screen, it will reach this line, this button line, and we'll call and execute the function, and we do not want that. It basically sends to the button this function, and wherever we click on it, it's being executed. So just let us recap. When we click on this button, this function is being called, is being executed. This function is being also executed, so this will increase the counter. This will increase the counter to what it already is +1. So, and the whole thing will be re-rendered, and instead of what value here was, it's gonna be the same value +1. And let's see this in browser. Let's save this. It says compiled successfully, so that's good. Okay, let's test. Increase, decrease. Alright, so it works. So that is state. So if we have say another value in this component, let's say counter2, I don't know, what we're gonna do, we're gonna create another use state, and we're gonna say counter2, for example. Say counter2. And here we're gonna say a div counter2, and basically the functionality is going to be the same. So let's delete this now. Okay, so that is state. Now let's look at props. Remember, props are the way to send data from a parent to the child. So from counter page to counter. Now we need to go on counter page and we send props like this. Go to the child component and say like, and let's call it the default value. It's being recommended to us. So default value, let's say it's 4. So what we now basically do is to send the value 4 into this child component with the key of default value. Let's save. And here in counter page, we are going to receive these props by saying props. And now just so you can see, you're gonna say props that default value and save this. So let's see in browser. Okay, it's 4. Let's increase, decrease, so it doesn't work, you see, because we showed to the screen what we have received in this component. So we received props that default value. And by the way, if you don't want to write props, you can do this as well. Default value. What it does is it's called this structure. So we are taking from what we have received the key called default value. In here we do not need to write props anymore, but we're gonna go with the props. So just for the sake of example, so you can understand it better. All right, so let's change that back to counter. Sorry, counter. Okay, so next what we want to do is use effect. And let's actually first import it from React. Use effect. So use effect is also a hook, like use state, and it's a function that will run when the component is being shown to the screen. Like maybe you want to make some calculation or get some data from an API. This will be run when you mount the component. Now let me show that in action. You would usually put it first because just have a clean and nice looking component, but if for whatever reason you need to have something else to be first, then it's okay. So we imported this, and this component receives two parameters. One is a function, inline function or callback, and the second one is a array called dependency array. So this is a callback. If you don't know what a callback is, it's just a function sent as a parameter, and when use effect wants to use it, it's just gonna use it. So if the array sent as the second parameter is empty, then this function is going to run when a component is being rendered to the screen. But if we place here any variable, this code will also be executed. The code in the callback will be executed when this variable changes. So here we want to write props that default value. Okay, so you can understand better. Let's write the code here. Set counter props default value. Okay, so let me explain this one more time. Use effect takes two parameters. One which is a callback function, so it's a function that is going to be called when it is going to be called, and the second one is an dependency array, which if empty, this code right here is going to be run only when you show the component to the screen for the first time. If not empty, this code will also run when you change this variable. So we send from the parent this value, and here it sees that the child component has received a new value in props, and what it does, it sets this value into the counter. This piece of code runs when you render the function, so it's the first thing that it will do. And you will see that when we look in the browser, you will see here the value 4. Okay, let's save this and let's look into the browser. Let's refresh it. We see it's 4, and we can increase, we can decrease. Let's refresh it again. Okay, it's 4 again, you see. So we have sent from the parent component to the child the value 4 with the key default value. Here we have cached this value, and with the use effect function we set it to be the value in the counter variable. And when the component is being rendered to the screen, here in the counter variable, now that is props. Don't worry if you haven't got it. We're gonna write many components in the project that we are going to do, and you will get it, I promise. Now there's one more thing. You see here that it appears as 0 before it appears as 4. See, 0 4 0 4. That is because we set the default value to be 0, and now after this the value from props is being added from use effect. So this code is above this code, so you can see that it is being rendered first. Okay, so to fix this, we're gonna say props.default value. So what it does is it ensures us that when this component is being rendered to the screen, the value that is going to take is going to be from props, and specifically default value. Then if we want to, if it happens that we change it from the parent component, the use effect will kick in and will change the counter. Alright, let's save this and see in browser. Refresh. 4, you see there's so you see the 0 doesn't appear anymore. It's 4. It's just 4. let's change just for the sake of example. Let's write here 5 in the parent component. We now send the value 5 into the child 5, and it receives improps 5 here. It sets with the use state, it sets its value to be 5. So what we're going to see on the screen is going to be 5. Okay, so it's 5. Refresh 5. Okay, it works. So that is state and props. It is not complicated. It might seem at first, but it takes just a couple of components and you get this pretty quickly. If you had any problems understanding it, you will surely understand it later in the course by doing the personal website along with me. So let's wrap everything up. The CSS folder here is the folder where you write JavaScript code that pushes or takes HTML code from index.html here that stays in public. Index.js is our entry point. We send it the component that we want to show to the screen, and in the components folder here we created two components. One is a parent and one is a child. So the parent's HTML contains the child's HTML, and that's basically the magic of React. We don't write a long HTML code, but we divide it in components, and those components can have different functionality each. Okay, and lastly, in package.json we have the list of our libraries that we installed. We installed them all at once with typing yarn or npm install in the terminal, and we can install new libraries by typing yarn add and the name of the library, or npm install and the name of the library. So that's it for the video. I will see you in the next one where we will start our personal website.